sign the book. We did.
The book.
The
yes.
book. That's our
Yeah.
John Hancock's in it now.
You saw how old the book was, right?
I didn't notice how old it was.
Oh, it goes back a long time, yeah.
Does it really?
Yes, yes. I don't know exactly
Should
how
have gotten a
long,
little
but
history
I've
on
been
that while we were
signing
signing.
I've been signing the same book for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
As have I.
Right.
Actually more, 24
Yes.
years.
Oh, wow.
I think there's some really old books in the space where my desk currently is,
Oh,
which
is
has
that
a
right?
lot of like archival
The
town clerk
originals.
information. Yeah,
Right.
it's just it's like these old leather bound books.
Neat.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting and it's still kind of new at school. You have
I like it.
to know how to actually do a script signature.
Right.
So, Martha or Mike, do either of you want to chair this meeting?
No. No, you've got the agenda.
I keep not putting like election of officers on here, but I think that might come next because now that we have more than just three of us who are official members. So call to order. Thank you guys for coming. Citizen queries, which if anyone has anything specific to bring up that isn't already on the agenda, that's an opportunity. I don't welcome
No, I
Mary.
just came, I
Yeah.
saw the notice, somebody said, have you ever seen this committee? I said, no. I said, so I said, I'm not doing anything, I'll go to the meeting and see the
Yeah.
committee.
Excellent.
Glad you did.
Do you want to, I was just going to turn to Mike or Martha, do you want to give like a brief history of this committee? A little bit? I don't know, just
Sure.
for the benefit of.
I think the committee was originally founded in the late 90s, and I got involved in 2007-8 when they, after a 10-year period, required to update the open space and rec plan. So I think it was 98 or 97, 2007-8 was time to do an update on the plan. The plan kind of inventories natural resources in town, already protected open space, priorities for future protection, whether for recreation purposes or both rec and non-rec open space purposes. Could be, private land trusts or the state or the town itself, protecting different places for different uses and reasons. It's like a full inventory of everything that exists in town. Plan gets approved by the state, and if they approve it, it allows the town to have access to apply for different grants from the state for watershed protection, open space protection, different things like that. Crash course. Cliff notes.
Yeah. So the last plan, which this is a copy of, and it's on the website digitally, was approved in 2010. So our Newbury is one of many towns in the Commonwealth whose plans have expired. So that's part of, getting some folks interested in thinking about updating the plan is where we started a couple months ago, and that's still where we are, basically. Anyone else? Okay. So Martha and I've, been thinking about this a little bit, and one thing we had talked about the last meeting was just sort of familiarizing ourselves with what's in the plan. So I don't know if we want to start there. I know each of us kind of raised our hands to dive in a little deeper to certain sections. I did notice something today that I hadn't noticed earlier, which is the state has a workbook that kind of lays out how to help a town do this, create a plan or update a plan. And there was actually I printed it out. It was so much paper, but I printed it out just because I figure it'll be good for 7 years. But there's sort of was a list of the sections, and then they're checking the box of must be revised or may need revision or no revision really needed. I don't know if you guys like found that page in this workbook, but I thought, oh, that would have been good to look at from our last meeting. But so the sections are the plan summary, introduction, which encompasses the sort of purpose of the planning process and how you go about public participation. Section 3 is community setting. So those first, the summary and the introduction of your process, those are obviously must be revised categories because it's work that you're doing every time you update it. Section 3 is community setting, which is mostly, it's sort of a mix, like regional context, history of the community, population characteristics, growth and development patterns. So history of the community is in the, you probably don't need to change anything because it goes way back and brings you up to the present in terms of community history. Regional context may have changed a little, and then the demographics and population growth, that stuff would definitely need to get updated. Section 4 was environmental inventory and analysis, which includes all of the resource stuff, so geology, water resources, vegetation, fisheries, wildlife, environmental challenges, scenic resources. So they have that in the may need revision category. So, you know, things like geology probably haven't changed too much, although with a barrier beach, I guess there could be some discussion of erosion or other things that, you know, are obviously changes to a community. But, you know, a lot of that from the previous plan can probably be updated more than like starting from scratch, I guess. And then section 5, inventory of lands of conservation recreation interest. That's all pretty much new because you have to just go through and say what do we have, what does the town have. It would be carrying forward things that have been listed before, open space lands that are permanently protected, that would be the same, but then anything new that's been added to open space properties. Community goals, analysis of needs, goals and objectives, 5-year action plan, public comments, updated references. That's kind of the meat of the update, I think, is developing those sections. So anyway, I hadn't noticed that chart before. I can share the link to you guys by email.
So they haven't added anything in there, I haven't looked at it, I should have, regarding like climate change or anything like that? Specifically.
Well, so this is the same workbook that's been out around since 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a couple double checks on that and tried to make sure that that was
Yeah.
The most
the
recent.
most
Yeah, that's
recent
it.
one.
Deval Patrick was the
Yeah.
governor when this was written, when we were looking through it, so we didn't
Yeah.
pursue it as well.
Yeah, so that's the one we worked with when we did
I think
that.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe there's language within it that's been updated, but just the overall format. So my guess is the answer would be things like environmental challenges or, yeah.
Right.
But there's no new sections or new like formatting or anything. It's pretty much been the same, so. Yeah, so we want to go around and talk about the sections we looked into a little bit. Yeah. Do you guys remember? Yeah, I have to look at the minutes to tell you. So did someone have introduction or community setting? Section 2 and 3? Section 3, community setting, maybe we didn't give anyone that.
I guess I had section
Yes, it
3, if I look at the minutes,
Yeah.
and I was asking you about that.
Yeah.
So let me just,
I don't know wanna sort of look at this while you're listening, just to see what the last one looks like?
But I mean, they're definitely, like you said, some of those sections don't need to be touched, like the history, right, the context, some of the demographics, though, certainly the refresh there. I
Yeah,
think that was probably part of a larger conversation around where do we get the data from, right?
Right.
Merrimack Valley,
Yeah.
whatever, depending on what it is.
yes. Yep,
I mean, that definitely struck me as something that the refresh would be valuable to see. And I have to say, partly I got a little thinking around, the previous plan, you know, there were mentions of like even telecommuting and working from home and things like that. And that has probably changed to an even greater extent. So
Yeah.
interesting, but you know, that probably is harder data to get at versus your typical like professions that people work in and
Right.
stuff like that.
mhm.
You know, so.
How much, I was thinking this process will have the benefit of the master plan having
Right.
just been finished. Because my guess is, you know, a lot of that data crunching and also just context kind of discussion would be the same.
And
So
the housing-
I guess you could,
Housing production plan as well.
yeah.
The development and growth area, yeah.
So I don't know, I mean, anyway. I think the theme through all of this is to try to figure out, like, can we do this ourselves or do we need more help? So I'm just kind of putting that question out there. But, so Bill and Christina, you guys looked at section 4.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Independently, but I think, so, I mean,
We're very thorough.
well, yeah, I mean, we went through this stuff line by line, but it's a lot of updating, but, you know, as you kind of touched on before, some of it's just like going back and checking the facts and updating it, like number of moorings and boats and that kind of stuff. We weren't 100% clear on sources because a lot of this stuff, they were making some pretty interesting statements but with zero reference. So I'm like, well, where'd they get that from? So that it's a little bit of work to kind of source some of this stuff.
Yeah.
There's actually, they had like a whole table and then it said source on the bottom and it was empty. So we gotta work on that, or that we
But you guys probably know, right, they wrote the plan, so you'll know, like, where the information came from. So we kind of outlined some things that we said, okay, and you guys might know, okay, well, who do we talk to? Where can we get that info now? You know, so that we can find it.
Yep. So that was the first takeaway from it. What else we had?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit like what might be useful, because there's so much knowledge at this table about the sources of data that are out there right now and that are current, that I know that for me, it would be really helpful to just kind of clip through each page and you guys say, oh yeah, that's where, you know, that's where this info is, this is where that info is. And then if we all come and we're kind of, oh, that's gonna take a little bit more work, you know, is it something that we aren't gonna be able to easily get by ourselves or not? So I just felt like I couldn't answer the question 100%, and I just honestly thought everybody here would know it, but I took quick notes as to what needed to be updated. So if we think that's a good use of time, we can do that. Or we can keep going around the table and check in on all of it first and then see, we can circle back, or I can, you know, make a table of it and send it out and people could fill in, this is where all that information is as well, or we could just do it live.
I'm always up for like doing it when you're in a room with people who have
Just
knowledge
proud
rather
of
than
it.
like sending a link to a Google sheet and do you get time, whatever. So, yeah, why don't we,
We'll see what we remember.
why don't we,
Ready to go?
simple question, and that is, did you have access to the previous plan?
No,
That's
I
what
went
we're-
through the previous plan.
That's-
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, I have the previous plan right here, and I took notes on all the things that I think need to be updated.
right. So, that information largely came from MVPC, right? Yes, Martha?
Well, some of it certainly did. You know, things about moorings and stuff would have reasonably come from the harbor master.
No. Okay. That section of the plan was largely assembled based on information from the regional planning people who have that kind of information. Information specific to Newbury was contributed by either the planner or members of the committee, right? So what I'm getting at is that there are areas where you probably don't know information which are highly technical. I'm just looking at something here which says your vegetation, right? Well, that fundamentally is affected by some change in relation to climate change currently. Okay, there are some things going on there that may or may not be. What I'm getting at is a lot of this information is available, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Not that you were, I'm not
Right, no, so
suggesting
why
that.
don't I go through like some of the things and you guys just tell me, oh yeah, we can get that from this, and we'll decide like if
Yeah.
it's reasonably available, then we'll figure out if we can get it ourselves. So does that sound good?
Yeah.
I'll just kind of clip through.
Yeah, let's do it.
So like geology was, that's not gonna change, so we can skip deciding how to change it.
Yeah, you're already in geology. And,
One.
one. Yep, I didn't also feel like there was much to change on geology.
There might be, I'm just thinking about soils and thinking about prime ag soils and like if
Things that weren't
if
looked
things
at.
are better now, like maybe the data is like more specific now or. you
Well,
know.
what I looked was, like the source of it was like the soil survey for Essex County, Massachusetts, which was last updated 1981, and I feel like that maybe doesn't change that often, but I hadn't looked it up. I had circled it to look it up to see if that had been updated or not. But that was like the bulk of the section.
No. Short of a massive change, which I think we all would have noticed, my guess is the soils of what they were.
Yeah,
then-
it's all digitized
and
now,
Yeah, and I think
probably getting used to it.
what does become perhaps germane is if you start looking whether those kinds of soils are at risk 30 years later because of what's happening again through temperature rise and changes in plant, or, and how that affects recreation is the big question. In other words, do you change the kind of grasses you're using for areas that have hardware through use in the recreation? I mean, all those kinds of questions are very technical, it seems to me, but they're very good questions to ask.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that geology, soils, and topography, like we can just see if there were any refinements, but I also do feel a little bit like it's probably the same mapping that hasn't really been updated.
Probably.
So if there
Maybe
is-
tightened up or something like that, or,
Right.
you know.
And
So-
maybe if this was, more, it didn't even necessarily provide the percentages, so I feel like it was just descriptions. Here are the soils that are here, pretty basic. So
That's what I was wondering, if it got to the level of, 14% of the time town is
Right.
prime ag soils or statewide importance, local importance.
It
didn't
didn't.
really dive into that.
it didn't. So if we think that there was an effort to like identify more, prime farmland, and we want to put that in here, we could do that.
And we have
If we think it's
Yeah.
relevant, you know, if you think that it's relevant and important enough to put in there. And it's actually really easy to get.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
There is a map for superficial geology that was from Merrimack Valley Planning, that you could just see if that has been updated or not. And
Going on the map side of things, definitely we should look at the master plan too, to
Yeah,
steal from, or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, that might already be done for us to a relevant date, you know? This is so
Yeah.
recently completed.
Some of them weren't, and some of them weren't, so, but yes.
Yeah.
definitely.
Just think, yeah.
okay.
But we, for example, the planning board voted to designate some soils, local soils of agricultural significance, which are not ones that show up as prime agricultural soils, but are areas that are being actively farmed right now, so that might be something to add.
Yeah.
Where does that?
Is that recreation?
It's not recreation, but if you're talking about the town as a whole and the soils, then I think it is appropriate.
Well, okay.
And
Well,
if you're doing an environmental inventory and analysis,
Yeah, it seems like it would go in the, very nicely in the soil section.
Yeah.
Okay, and so is that mapped? How do we have it inventoried already? You know, which ones did we designate, and where is that?
so we can get that for you. We've got a listing from the guy at USGS who did that.
Okay, so can I put like the planning department has that info? Okay. Okay.
And that was with Greenbelt, that,
Yes.
Different side of Greenbelt.
Maggie.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Maggie Abbey probably working with you
Yeah.
guys on that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, then the land use section is like how many acres are in which categories, and so, you know, is that master plan, I would imagine, would have that already, but if not, it also seems like it would be like Mass GIS or,
Various other data sources, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, but this is 2003, definitely needs to be updated.
Yeah, exactly.
That table is sourced, Mass GIS, Merrimack Valley.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Came from both. So I also have a little list, because you know me, about what things that we might want to ask from Merrimack Valley. Because we always talk about, you know, potentially getting some of their hours. So I will put the updated land use classification. You know, there's some water quality studies under water resources. There were water quality studies, you know, that were kind of talking about things from the 1990s, and the Little River being a contributor to, you know, potential contamination in some other, you know, mill areas. And I just feel like that has probably evolved quite a bit since the 1990s. And so I'm wondering if and I just haven't compared it to the master plan to know if, you know, water quality is in there and it's already been updated. So if anybody already knows the answer to that. And I had meant to print out the table of contents, at least for the master plan, so I had it in front of me.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's very specific about who's doing what studies on water quality in the town.
Right, like Parker River Clean Water Association is mentioned in here for doing some sampling. And it says how poor the condition of the water was, and people call for and stuff. And I would think,
That's changed.
Yeah.
Because Parker River has been absorbed into the Tri-River people. So we now have Ipswich and the Parker River, and what's the other one, the
Essex.
Yeah, Pye Rivers, and they're essentially the operational, they're the people who are now working together, which is important because, you know, basically those three rivers empty into the Parker River Sound, and the quality of water in that has to do with what happens in our part of it. So that's something that needs to change. in terms of data and information.
Yeah, that's a great one, the collaborations that have formed over the last
Yep, yep.
couple of decades and what kind of, and they're making good progress. Okay. I mean, is this something that's just like personal communication to these folks, or that seems like the most efficient way, unless anyone thinks it's been written up already?
I think it would start just reaching out to the people who work at the watershed associations.
Yeah.
Parker River Clean Water does still have a board, they don't have any staff, but the, water quality person at IRWA, Ryan O'Donnell, would probably be the point person there. There's been one thing that's changed significantly is the MS4 stormwater regulations that didn't really exist very much the last time this plan was done. So the towns and watershed groups have kind of been working together to, beef up the water quality monitoring.
That's a great thing to add in here too. Okay. So the NIPD's program. Okay.
The other thing that may not be mentioned here would be, some of the more recent concerns about combined sewer overflows coming down the Merrimack.
Definitely, yeah. Dumps right in the island.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So that would,
Yeah, affecting the Plum Island.
I mean, there are committees in town that are kind of following that, Board of Health and Conservation Commission, so that, there could be outreach just locally, but then again, the watershed groups on, the watershed council.
Right, members of PC, probably to a certain degree.
Okay. These are good additions and updates. Look like Mass DMS, we probably have some ins until getting some current data on seafood.
You have to go next door next.
Yeah, we got that covered.
That won't be too bad.
The aquifer recharge areas, I imagine that this probably is written in the master plan because of, how we're dealing with water. So, does anyone know if that is in detail in the master plan?
Yeah, I'm sure this may actually have some more detail than that does, although, I don't know pumping capacities, if they've changed at all since this was done.
I think one thing this sort of a side comment, but there's been a lot of stuff, reports and studies and assessments over the decades, and I always feel like it's hard to find them. There's no good for Newberry, stuff that pertains to Newberry and the Parker River, and this is it, but as we dig into data sources, it would be kind of cool to just try to keep a really good track of the resources and then put the PDFs all in one place on our website for everybody to access really easily.
Yeah, it's a great idea. All right, so we think the master plan would be the source for aquifer recharge areas, and how many accounts there are that take water from Newburyport versus how many businesses get water from Newburyport system. We think that those little details, it really just talks about where everybody gets their water. And then it throws specific numbers in. So we either take out the numbers and we just say a number of businesses and residences get their water from Newburyport, or we dig in and we find the updated numbers.
We have numbers in the master plan, but I'm not sure that they're broken down quite this way.
But we could adopt whatever they have and just put it right in here, replace what's here with that is. Okay, so I'll just put master plan.
As a start, I'd say, and then we might find out we want to dig a little more if
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, and if you live in the Byfield Water District, we do get an annual report, don't we?
I just
Yeah.
found an old one
Yeah.
the other day.
I know.
In the mail,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ah,
which
bring it
basically,
in.
Seen it.
yeah, well, which basically says what they did in the year, and it's available, and they have an office, and they're legally required to provide it anyway.
The city of Newburyport does?
Pardon?
Byfield.
This is Byfield.
Oh, the
Byfield.
Newburyport.
Water
That's
District,
Oh,
yeah.
the Byfield
Yeah.
Water
Whether
District.
You
you're-
see, that's important because they, have they accessed that at the recreation fields? I don't know yet.
90%.
Have they? Anybody know?
Have they what?
Have they accessed the water district at the recreation fields, at Munter Fields? In other words, is there a water supply there?
I think so, because they're bathrooms, right?
Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's changed,
yeah.
because that wasn't part of,
And I
What
think they're
the use was.
irrigated.
Yeah.
I did just grab this from upstairs, which is the recreation master plan for Mantor.
yeah, and this is an important thing for us to discuss, because they've made some assumptions in there which play right into what we're gonna be talking about.
Okay.
Just not to jump back to section 3, because but
Please do.
there's a lot of data around recreation in section 3. Like, do you think that's, because
This
it's
is
not
like
in the,
specifically for like current conditions at the Central Street Mantor Fields. So there's
It's
not
not
a lot of
broader,
like
right?
how many people are
Yeah.
using or how much water they're
Participation.
using. There's not a lot of detail.
And when we did section 3 before, we reached out to a lot of different groups, like the Little League, to
Of
get all of
course,
those,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and the people who are using the evergreen and stuff like that, so. I think it would probably be the same because these guys don't
Exactly.
oversee all of the recreation in town.
Yeah.
But we could get their help
Yes.
doing
absolutely.
that.
We better get
Right?
that.
They should be able to get
Yeah.
that, right?
Absolutely.
We better
Let's
get
do
that
that.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're proposing a major change at the recreation fields, which plays into a much broader area than just people playing games. They're proposing, among other things, there should be water access at a place, frankly, where it's very questionable. Have you looked at, I mean, I went, the night I appeared before, I'm sorry to do this, but the night I appeared before the selectmen to say, gee, would you appoint me? They were reviewing this, and I was very kindly given a copy of, this is the master plan for the Recreation Committee. Anybody seen it? No? Right. Why weren't we told about this?
Just the Mantor Fields
Yeah.
rec plan.
but
Yeah.
Why weren't we told about this?
Well, I think
at
they
our
just
last
finished
meeting?
it.
Well, yes, I know, but okay, but here it is, okay? And
Yeah,
it's-
same as that.
I
Yeah.
brought it, yeah.
Yeah, and it plays right into all of the sorts of issues which Jim is raising, that it's a major part of, and after all, this is not the open space plan, it's the open space and recreation plan.
Right.
Right.
Someone, yeah, we talked about reaching out to other committees, so I don't know if that's happened yet. But
Has it?
that was, I don't know.
No, I did not reach out to the Conservation
I think we
Commission
haven't.
before tonight.
Yeah,
I can tell you that.
But
yeah.
it does seem like, yeah, it'd be worth reading that plan for your section
Yeah.
I
three
think it'll
E.
be
I
Yeah.
didn't realize that this expansive December.
Yeah, yeah, even though it's only one little, part, it's still a recreation plan, so.
Mhm.
And did it get approved or is it a draft right now?
Okay, the Recreation Committee is a self-funded committee, it's a, what's the phrase?
There's a revolving fund.
Yeah, it's a revolving fund, so it doesn't get money from the town, it gets money from its activities, right? And so what they have done is they have hired a consultant basically to look at the Mantor Field site totally and to look at it in terms of its potential through age groups and a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know whether they put it online, whether it's available. Do you know whether it's available?
Actually, I don't know if it's online or not.
Right. Anyway, it includes trail work, a bunch of stuff. And what I was going to do was reach out to them, frankly, because they appear to have totally either missed and or deliberately ignored a trail that was created on a little island which exists off the bottom, if you go to the bottom of the airstrip, the old airstrip.
The Boy Scouts.
A Boy Scout made a trail there. Unfortunately, it has some access issues. But there are a whole bunch of things which we can get into later. But
Okay.
that's part of what we need to know.
Yeah, no, it would be good.
I mean, maybe we should just have a joint meeting with the rec committee pretty soon.
I think we should.
Just get everyone.
Well, in
Talking
the
to each
past,
other.
we had somebody from their committee regularly meeting with this committee.
Yeah, and they're supposed to have someone from this committee meeting with their committee.
Mhm.
That's part of their
Right.
charter or whatever. So I need to re-engage.
And the plan has to be an open space and recreation plan. I feel like we started with this on the first night, right? It has to be an open space and recreation plan in order to meet the guidelines from the state. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, super. So there are some things in here that I feel like come right out of Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, so I'm sure that's like a quick Mass GIS statistics, how many vernal pools are in, because the numbers probably changed, how many of them are certified versus uncertified.
Well, on the flood hazard areas, there was mention about a serious spring event in 2006, affected the beaches of Plum Island pool.
That's way out of date.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't know, we've got some pretty major issues on those barrier beaches out here, and what's going on this winter with Salisbury and everything. How much do we want to dig into that? I mean, that's pretty substantial. That would be all new material that we could add to the report.
Right, and I think some of this is mentioned in the master plan. We're also working on the hazard mitigation plan update, so some of that is also mentioned there. So we've got sources that we can,
Okay.
as well as historic knowledge, like 2013 when we lost 6 houses
Yeah.
into the ocean.
Yeah.
And flood maps have also been updated twice. I'm not seeing any dates on flood maps here, but we probably want to make mention, and they're in the process of being updated again,
The FEMA ones.
the FEMA ones, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I feel like flood came up in a couple of different places, and so it probably is required to come in a couple places, but I was trying to get my head around, where it comes up and to just avoid not duplicating any information, but there was like a different angle on it, in different paragraphs, so.
Just because I haven't really dived into what the current plan looks like, and this is called inventory and analysis. Like, is each section, like, is water resources have an inventory and analysis, or is analysis kind of like bundled at
Sort
the
of
end under challenges or something?
It's kind of woven in,
Yeah.
so, water resources like the subsection watersheds and rivers. It's like, here's what we have, and then the analysis, like in the last few paragraphs are, but there's heightened risk and incremental encroachment into surrounding buffer areas that protect the freshwater and saltwater resources. So there is like analysis, and it's kind of woven in by next to the inventory. Yeah.
Because that's a way to think about it too, right? Like, if we're just gathering the information and putting it all in, and then how do we do the analysis? Like, are we grabbing other analyses to like dump them in here, or are we supposed to like do some kind of thoughtful analysis ourselves once we have the inventory? Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different way of thinking about the update, I think. Again, I could spend more time on the workbook, because I'm sure they discuss that a little bit, but, and anyway. Because there's a whole nother section, analysis of needs. So maybe this section 4 is just kind of like, not a deep dive into, it's more inventory than analysis.
Yeah, no, it is.
I would think like the public survey and sort of that would help us with analysis potentially. So, anyway.
yeah, that requires some thinking, for sure.
And I think it's definitely good to just know that there is a lot of planning going on right now, both the master plan, but also this hazard mitigation plan. That committee that's been working with MVPC on that has really dived into like naming the specific roads that are the most vulnerable to flooding currently, stuff like that. Like we have a lot of that could just be brought in.
Yeah, that is like a question near the end of section 4 where it's just sort of, okay, you know, how much do we want to go into detail about this? Because we want to, you know, follow the format and include the required things. We could probably write a dissertation on climate change and sea level rise, and so I feel like I'm just trying to like get my head around how we want to succinctly say something.
Right.
So yeah, that's gonna take some finagling and thinking, I would say. Yeah, I guess on the wetlands, I was feeling like that was, you know, could probably get from NAGSP. I don't know if you had anything else.
I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that needs to be updated.
Yeah,
Just like,
exactly.
Yeah. It looks like most of it was taken from the master plan last time.
We might even be able to send a request to NAGSP and say, the town of Newbury is updating our open space plan. Can you please send us a list of XYZ and ask them to do it? Just like I was a project developer and I sent them my circle of my project area and they send me an analysis.
Right. Yes.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Well,
That'd be great if they did.
We'll ask
you're
them.
talking about the regional planning people, or,
No, the NAGSP program
Natural
that,
heritage.
the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program with the state. 'Cause
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, okay, so
They'd send you
my
a
experience anyway is the best access to them is probably through the regional planning board council, right? Commission.
Well, through Merrimack Valley.
It can,
Because
yeah,
they work closely together
Well-
as opposed to just
okay,
me.
I don't know. My experience just simply says that the environmental people at the planning commission are going to be the folks who probably know the best sources for this kind of information and probably have those sources, you know, sort of in telephone, email, or whatever contact, and they can either share them with us or they can in fact access them.
Yeah. Yeah, we can put it on the MVPC list. I mean, I know who to contact, but if it's something that we could put on MVPC so that then they can track it and.
Yeah, well,
get
I
it to us,
think
then
what
can
we
do that.
need to do is to sit down with them, to have a couple of us sit down with them and see, based on the kind of concerns that you've been identifying, what they can directly help us with, what they can point us to, and how much of that time might be ours from them or might not. That's, you know, I mean, come on, you guys, you're the people who are the official town contacts with them.
Yeah, we talk to them.
So, you
multiple
know, it
times a
shouldn't
day.
be based on my experience of working with them for a couple of, you know, for a decade.
We
Isn't
work with
that the
them
way
very
to do it?
closely. I think it depends on whether we have a contract with them for certain work or
No,
whether.
come on. Let's get off the formal stuff.
David, we in the town have a direct link to natural heritage, so I would probably
Yeah.
not go through MVPC to get to natural heritage.
Okay, good.
They could help us
Right.
if they were helping us with a whole number of things, but
Right.
I think if I just had a question, hey, can you provide a list of endangered species in Newbury, I would go directly to them.
Right, so
Yeah.
we need to know that,
Yeah,
okay?
that's what we're making a list of
Right.
right now, we're going to do that,
All
yeah,
right.
I agree. I think that I appreciate that Christina is starting that list, and we have as well, of what tasks this work could use MVPC for, and then I think we'll have to decide whether Are we gonna hire them? Can we do it through this local technical assistance funding, which is a few hours here, a few hours there? Just, we haven't figured that piece of it out yet. They're very willing and able to help us with most of this work if we ask them to, if we want them to.
Right.
But I'm not sure we fully know what we need to ask yet.
We would really need to figure out what the scope was, and then that would help direct us as to, do we need to contract with them for a certain amount of money, or can we get this under local technical assistance? And certainly the mapping would be part of it. We would probably want to contract with them for that.
And does it make sense to, we're now kind of making our list of the things that maybe NA or MVPC could help us with. Is it also worth just proactively asking them, hey, we're updating our open space and recreation plan, how do you help other towns do that? Just to even let them tell us what they usually do for people, so then we can cross that off our list and say, great, you guys can do that and we won't do that? Or which direction do you want to take it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think our experience with them is they're willing to do however much we would like them to do. They could be our consultant and basically take the lead on doing this whole thing, which would be, one box. Another would be helping us with certain portions of it, as they did with the master plan. They did the transportation section, they reviewed our natural resources, they did the housing and the economic development, and they did the map. So it was kind of a menu of things that they could help us with. So I think that's kind of a basic question, is how much of this do we think we can do ourselves, and how much would we like consultant help in kind of pulling the whole thing together.
What's the disadvantage or drawback having them act as our consultant to do the whole thing? Is it primarily just a funding thing, or we'd have to, I don't know what hoops we would have to jump through to get to that point?
It's not really hoops, it would be a funding thing, whether we have enough funds to fund it ourselves, or whether we would need grant funding to cover it.
Mm-hmm.
I think so we're kind of jumping a little bit, which is fine, because it just helps us with this conversation. But there's, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, the state has this one-stop grant portal where you can just put in an expression of interest for what you need help with, and they help tell you, oh, you can, access this grant or this grant. These are the appropriate places. So that is actually something we've been talking about intending to do, is just write, it's a very easy, one-pager expression of interest. We want to update our open space rec plan. Mm-hmm. And they have towns get money through the state grant program all the time. So if we were successful, we would know that, we would apply, they would read our expression of interest, they would give us feedback and say, these are good grant sources, and, you'd have to have a budget, a rough budget, and then you actually apply, and then I think we'd know this summer whether we got that grant. If it was a $30,000 grant, I looked through to see what the ranges of grant awards were for towns that get money to update their plan, as a project, and it was between $30,000 and $80,000. So I don't know that's a huge range, and I didn't dive in yet to know what's the difference between, the workbook's the same for every town, so, what's the difference between the actual tasks that are being funded. But assuming we get a grant, which I think we would, because our plan is out of date, we'd have to decide, are we going to hire MVPC to do that? Are we going to hire, a private planning consultant who's, works out of their house, whatever. You could put an RFP out and decide who you wanted to work with. I think we could have a discussion about the pros and cons of working with MVPC. I think there are a lot of positives because they're very familiar with us. They're just finishing our hazard mitigation plan. They could easily bring it over. The potential drawbacks are they work regionally for 16 towns. They have a lot of stuff going on. You know, we just have to think about what would be the best match for us in terms of our schedule, what their capacity is, you know, that kind of thing. So if that sounds, the benefit, I think, for a volunteer committee is you have someone in charge. Obviously, staff are in charge as well, and the committee, depending on how strong a committee is, in charge. The rec committee, you know, hired a consultant to do this master plan. Then they presented it to the select board ultimately in charge. Anyway, there are different processes in terms of creation of the plan, but I think Martha and I probably feel like it would be a good idea to try to get a grant and just have some additional resources to kind of be in charge. So.
It makes perfect sense. And then, yeah, and I think doing what we're doing too is really, in my mind, is just getting a good understanding how big a task this is.
Right.
And then I'm looking at this as just like the first step of what's much bigger and better to come down the road when I look at neighboring towns and their open space plans and stuff and what they've been able to do to acquire bonds, funds and stuff like that. So I understand that this is the first step, so I just didn't know.
Yeah,
I'm still getting my head around how big this is.
right.
Yeah.
I think we are,
Yeah,
yeah.
as you get into it, I think, the magnitude of it actually begins to become more apparent. There's the whole, the whole public outreach component, which is, part of the thing that we're required to do, that a consultant might be better able to, like, survey and, the public forums and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And developing the action plan at the end of the day has to happen, I think, driven by the committee as representing the town public as a whole. So that's like a critical piece that I think the committee would have to, we couldn't rely on a consultant to create our town's action plan. But we could rely on a consultant to bring it all together and shape it and, ask us the right questions. That kind of
And tabulate all the survey responses and all that kind of stuff, which can be
thing. Yeah.
pretty consuming.
Yeah, I would also, as we get through in our sections and see how much of it needs to be updated, it really is a lot. I would also be open to the idea of getting applying for a grant and using a consultant and helping guide them
Exactly.
to get us what we need,
Yeah.
whoever it is.
Expedite things too, potentially. It's gonna be quicker at it than I am.
Just one task.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Our own experience trying to do this in-house is that it's very difficult to actually be able to just focus on it and get it done in a timely fashion. So,
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, under saltwater wetlands, that's where some of the, I don't actually know that we need this, but it is related to recreation, but it's under saltwater wetlands. And it talks about the mooring permits, and the whole, where they are and where they're located. And it's, interesting, it seems like it probably, because this is a recreation, if it was just an open space plan, maybe, not, but because it's a recreation plan, it probably does make sense, but that's, pulling the info from the harbor master.
Did say that this has been described as one of the most important coastal ecosystems in northeastern North America.
I know, actually, it was kind of fun to read this
Yeah.
about like the great things that are in Newbury.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just-
Makes you really proud to live here.
yeah.
Yeah, the marine, it's updated. So that's the public access stuff, that's all just needs to be updated. The marine infernals and.
it's no longer.
It's no longer called that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether Pert Hull still has any moorings there or not. But yeah, all of that needs to be
Yeah.
at least checked and probably updated.
Right, right. You know, and then updating like the Riverways program and the grant to establishing access points and whatnot, you know, like just following up on all of those little questions that were, you know, great initiatives that were worth mentioning, and now we gotta see where they landed and if there's a different update. That makes sense.
Does it discuss like the dam removals and that kind of stuff in this section?
I don't remember seeing it.
I'm curious, I don't know, because
I
there's
don't know,
definitely
we
been.
discussed it in 2008,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't remember this last either.
Yeah.
or at least not on the Parker.
Yeah,
Actually, wait, I feel like this did come up somewhere in here.
There has been
Where would I look for it?
habitat enhancement, I know, upriver for the Diogenes fish.
mm.
'Cause it's
Right.
been an active program. I've been helping out a little bit.
We had some of the stuff about dams and the hazard mitigation, but I actually had Jack Rybicki, who really loves local history, looking into the history of all the dams, and it's like, it's really, to your point of like, you're sort of reading stuff and you're like, God, like really wrapping our arms around the history of the inland portion of the river for this town, it would be super interesting. It's sort of, he had a lot of information, but it wasn't necessarily like in a narrative that, I'm sure it exists
Yeah.
somewhere, but pulling all that.
Yeah, there's a reference here on page 40 under the marine and estuary fish, freshwater fish and shellfish. It says Town of Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, been working on several dam removal projects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, DMF updates. So yeah, it's just reaching out to all of those people. You know, it's right here who we need to reach out to, but it's doing that, actually. The vernal pools. Confirming different regulations and if certified vernal pools are still protected, different regulations, forest cutting practices, act regulations, those kind of things. Just kind of confirming everyone that they're all still valid. You know, we haven't changed the laws and that one got rolled into another one and that's no longer called the forest cutting practices act regulations, which is probably fine. It probably is still true, but I just feel like QCing every little one of those references will be important. Yeah, you know, like the Parker River Clean Water Association was working with Mass DOT to begin to focus on public education of roadkill issues for amphibians and reptiles, and kind of that's gotten a lot more attention in the last 15 years, I would say. So
Yeah, their turtle habitat work is really taken off.
yeah. So having an update on what that looks like would be important. Yeah, and then, you know, maybe we'll get to the next section that talks about the parcels that have been conserved, but it was the Open Space Committee is in conversations with Mass Land Acquisition Commission, Division of Fish and Wildlife, to identify parcels for purchase that would strengthen wildlife corridor areas. I don't know if there's a lot of wildlife corridor conversations going on, but that seems, you know, can be updated based on how those conversations have been going. I haven't seen a lot of porcupines in Newberry, but it's listed as common wildlife, so we might want to double check that one.
Species list are definitely a little out of whack, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I've been walking through my yard all the time.
Stay away from the dog. Okay, I feel like that's a big chunk of it. Oh wait, there's 2 or 3 more pages, so just quickly, that was another natural heritage and endangered species. Yeah, and then Newberry Reconnaissance Report. This is another report that maybe is hiding somewhere that we could put as a resource in the plan, but it was called the Newberry Reconnaissance Report.
Yeah, that's a good one, and that should be on our website if it's not.
Okay, good.
What is it? A report of? What is that?
It was, basically it was the windshield report, and it went through and looked at a number of like significant things. I think there's a whole section on the common pasture. if I recall.
Yes.
Yeah, it was done by Essex Heritage, you know, the outfit out of Salem.
Oh,
And as I remember, they basically literally drove around a lot.
It was the windshield report.
Yeah.
so scenic
and
resources.
they had a fair amount of input anyway, and they checked it out, and they were particularly concerned with Route 1A because that's a designated, you know, federally designated scenic highway and all the rest of it. But they also got into, you know, historic places and buildings and all the rest of it. And then they kind of, if I remember, they were going to include viewscapes, but they didn't do too well at that. They sort of ran ashore a bit because they couldn't agree. I talked to particularly the two of the women who did that, and they were very interesting. They couldn't agree what a viewscape was. Not in any sort of very radical way, but they saw them differently. And so viewscapes were 10 a penny along 1A, but then what happened? Well, you know, the point is, for example, the Newman Road has probably 4 or 5 key viewscapes depending which direction you're facing, among other things, and then there are a whole bunch of others.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, were they all to be just natural, or were they to include buildings? So the upper green, you know, and how do you document? But it turned up, I think, a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah.
And it's quite useful in terms of what they did identify.
Yeah.
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 I think their reference to the common pasture was important in some of the development efforts that happened, you know, sort of helping to not have them go any farther, like the solar field, I think.
Yeah, every use that's been proposed for over there, over the years.
Yeah,
The underwater ball field.
right.
Then the last one is environmental challenges. You know, again, it's like going through Mass DEP's website of any sites that are, you know, have currently active cleanups going on. It talks about the landfill, the status of the landfill. And then there's a section on erosion and another one on chronic flooding. So that's where, again, you know, we'll have to refine how much we want to talk about.
Yeah, and that's so much more critical now. We recognize that much more. So a lot of that's being addressed in the hazard mitigation plan.
Yeah,
too.
so we can just
So we can just
copy and
follow that.
paste. Okay, great. And then groundwater pollution, both point and non-point sources.
And there are issues here now, saltwater intrusion into wells and things like that, which I doubt was mentioned,
They actually
or did they?
did say that somewhere along here. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so it sounds like that section may have some, or the master plan may have some pieces in there, and then there's another erosion, sedimentation and erosion section as well. And this actually does mention the NIPDE stormwater permitting programs. And it was 2019, residents voted to adopt the stormwater management and illicit discharge and erosion control bylaw. So, you know, it's going back a ways, and so, you know,
2019?
9.
Oh.
Sorry, did I say
okay.
19?
Yeah, that's, yeah,
2009.
okay.
So yeah, just an update on how the NIPDE's program is going. So there is a spot there for that. All right, I know that was a lot, so I'm done. Section 4.
It's good.
But it gives us a
get
sense of
everything that it encompasses, yeah. like what we have, right?
Right.
That's like what we have, and then you're like, okay, what's
And now what?
protected? What are the uses? What are we, are we doing this well? What are our goals for the future? So it's a pretty critical section. Thank you. Going through all that. It's good.
I had number 5.
Oh,
Section 5, which is the inventory of lands of conservation and rec interest. So I had a couple of questions. I'll start with, I think, maybe the easiest one. For the master plan, the open space map is not completed, or it says like to be completed. Was that left that way, either knowing or in hopes of this committee reforming and kind of spearheading that work, or is that something that we're just still waiting on from MVPC, or did money not get spent on that that's still sitting there for that mapping initiative? It's, okay.
No,
Yeah, okay. Well, just, all the other, there's like 2 maps. There's that one and there's another one that
there's the housing,
Okay.
housing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there were 2, the housing was going to tie directly into the housing production plan, which is under process, and then I think they're thinking that open space.
This would drive that,
would
okay.
drive that.
we did, it's pretty updated from the existing open space that's protected, but that actual map hasn't been created yet. So that was the piece that MVPC was going to work on this spring, in my memory. Because it's tied to some of the assessors' data updates that get done annually as well.
The open space map?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my map, kind
Yeah.
of getting those layers onto
Yeah.
my map to use.
Okay, so that's kind of the point here. Just didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
No,
That was,
that's fine. Yeah.
so you think that that's being worked on currently by them? So you,
I think that's the plan. We need to, they've had some turnover in their GIS department. I think we need to circle back with them
Let's see.
as well.
okay,
But I think that will be able to be completed by MVPC.
okay.
Yes. And Greenbelt had already given some of the updates there. There was a fair amount of like, we're recreating stuff that's already in MassGIS, and Greenbelt has something. There's just like all this swirling data. So that was part of what slowed it down.
Okay.
Sorting through it all.
Okay. So I think one of my main questions about this section was the organization of the data in here, in the tables, and kind of like how we present the inventory. I looked at the section from the handbook just relative to this section to kind of help me just think about. It was very hard for me to separate protected open space from just like open space, like school property or something like that. Mentally, like I have to retrain my brain to look at it that way.
Yeah.
But they want all that information in here, both protected and, quote, protected. But there was a table here that I didn't know if any of the existing or long-term committee members here could help shed a little light on. It's called Town-Owned Parcels of Unknown Open Space Attributes.
Yes,
I
right.
read it many times on multiple different nights.
You didn't have to say that again.
And I tried
No,
to understand what that meant.
Oh, I see that one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, what page are we on, please?
It is page 69,
Okay,
table 5-6.
Yes, 5-6.
well, I can raise a hand about that if you want.
I would love it.
Well, okay, the co-conspirator was Dan Streeter,
Okay.
okay, and basically it was in the primitive days of running essentially a screen of properties over certain sizes, and eventually coming down to a listing of properties which essentially we didn't know much about, but we suspected that either they were badly recorded in potential relation to 61A or B, because the town in the 90s, 80s and 90s was very bad about 61, the use of 61, okay, and people just declared that they were doing it, and they didn't keep records. So that's, I think, I would have to
Well,
look now.
almost
the
all
actual-
of these are on Plum Island, they're beachfront properties.
Right, okay, and there, yes, there were some other,
And then there's the one behind.
so this one, okay, but you see, it starts off, well, not very well described, is it? Across the corner of middle what?
Right, on Elm Street.
Behind PO.
Well, that one's the park that wraps around the
Yes,
post office.
right,
So I'm not
okay.
quite sure why that's on here as an unknown open space attribute.
Right, so I think at that point there was no information as to who either owned them or controlled them. No clear information anyway. And didn't the town, in fact, in that instance, move to declare that that was now a park?
I think it was granted to the town via will to be used as a park, and that's where the memorial is now. But anyway,
But that's, I mean, those kinds of things, I think, are the ones, and the rest of them are essentially properties on Plum Island that nobody had information about at that point.
right, and some of them we may have sold. There were two efforts to, well, there's an effort in probably 2010 or so to divest ourselves of some of these Plum Island
Yeah.
properties, declare them surplus, and we issued RFPs for their sale, so.
But I think the other thing was that it turns out there's not, August 2010, the assessors' records were, and to some degree still are, really bad in terms of how much, who owns it, doesn't own it, where it came from, etc. And that, I suspect, underlies a lot of this. I don't know.
I mean, I could see some of that. And I remembered some of that from back then, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like standing clear in my mind. And I just kept kind of circling around it again and again, like, what is this table? What are we doing with this table? Do we need it? Is it supposed to be something else,
So I think a lot of these, looking at the addresses like 10 Oldham Way, I think that's actually where the sewer pumping station is and things like that. So they were open spaces, a lot of these on Plum Island that were just small parcels that could not be developed in and of themselves. And a lot of them have since been sold off.
Yeah, and they came from the original dividing up of the island into all the little tiny parcels,
Beach
right?
Island, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
So do we want to include it again?
Well, I guess the question is it something that's required?
I don't know that if that,
Or was it just, it's a listing of vacant parcels that, they're not park parcels, but they were just vacant, undeveloped parcels, and most of them could not be developed.
What the town owns
That
already?
the town owns.
Yeah, I mean, in my
Development
mind,
of the town.
I was thinking if the town owned a bunch of these parcels, and if we were trying to conserve open space, I guess they're not developable, but if the person next door buys it, and then they turn it into their lot, then they could develop them. So are we still doing that? Are we still like identifying town-owned parcels that nothing's on and putting them up for sale?
We haven't gone through that exercise for a while.
Yeah. Well, I know Plum Island is such a sensitive area now too that I've seen some of the options that we want to get that land back.
Well,
So-
yeah, there was discussion about that time, 2010 2012 about whether we should do that. In other words, whether we in fact should encourage people by selling them property which allowed them to have a bigger footprint or whatever it might be. And you can well expect there was a division of opinion. And frankly, I was for, hey, we don't need to do that, particularly because the ones on Plum Island are just going to create issues, which we don't need to deal with, frankly. And this was at a time when, you know, we had the fancy sewer system, which promptly failed the first severe winter we got, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good exercise to have as good a list as possible of town-owned property, period, and then you can kind of have all your fields of like, this is care, custody, and control of the rec committee, this is, you know, care, custody, and control of, I don't know, this was donated to the town for the purpose of something, like just as much as possible, getting a handle on what the town owns is like a good exercise. It may not necessarily translate directly into having to be included here, but maybe like we're saying, maybe something comes to light that we're like, oh, that could be conveyed to Greenbelt because Greenbelt now owns the property next door to it, or you know, something where it's like there's a better management or stewardship that we uncover and we can kind of set an action for it. So it's probably a good process, but it's a slog, I will just say. Having helped some other towns do it, it's like weird tax title stuff and digging into the registry, and you know, the GIS line doesn't line up with the parcel line, and we came across a property recently that is like owner unknown, like, and some people have dug it, you know, the title research, but it's never been discovered, but it abuts some of the state land. It's like, someone should own that. Someone should figure that out at some point, so we could at least identify what those kinds of questions are related to open space.
So one of the tables is all town-owned Conserve Rec properties, which, like the other tables in here, all just need a fresh, you know, update from 2008.
Yeah.
They got broken out as well, like, there's a whole table of just what, you know, Greenbelt owns. Then there's like, anything from like the trustees, or the state, or the feds, is kind of off on its own thing. But I didn't know if like, maybe it if they should kind of all be more grouped together, you know, in a table there, designated whether it's, you know, private, nonprofit, state, federal agency, and whatnot, instead of having them spread out across different tables. Mostly too because it's all permanent protection level under those entities, so they thought they could all easily live together. And same thing with like the CR, APR, conservation restriction, and ag preservation restriction information as well, could kind of all be in its own table, just for clarity, regardless of who the holder is, town, nonprofit, state agency. I thought just as like an easy way to read and get that data without being like, oh, I'm on this table and this is, you know, Greenbelt's conservation restrictions, and now I'm on this table and this is the town's conservation restrictions, you know, just to have it all kind of concise there.
So it's the kind of protection that's the sorting category. You'd still have like, it's Greenbelt or it's trustees, like you could have that in your table, but not.
Yeah, because they kind of flip it, excuse me, between like some of the tables. Like there's a table that's permanently protected properties over 100 acres. Is it necessary for that to be its own standalone table, or is that mixed in with all the other permanently protected properties in town? You know?
I kind of liked some of the way that it was, I don't know, it was sort of interesting in some ways.
To have it spread?
To have a couple of different tables, as opposed to just having one big massive table that might be so overwhelming.
Sure.
That.
I mean, we could easily break it. I mean, there's not an unlimited amount of organizations holding land in town, you know, in conservation. So I mean, we could easily break it out to separate for like each organization. You know, the town, trustees, Greenbelt, state, feds, and have the listing of the parcels that fall under, kind of each organization as well. I was curious, I'm asking more of like a good way to kind of organize and present it,
Yeah.
Be great to just have a digital
Yeah.
sortable table, right?
Right?
And then you can just like go, presuming this will be mostly a living online document rather than a PDF that we have to scroll through weird tables, but I don't know. Yeah, those are good questions.
I assume some of the coding that was associated with the tables is derived from assessors.
Probably.
That, for the keys to these tables kind of came maybe from how the assessor's record is presented.
No, they came, I think, from searches done through the assessor's records.
No,
and
but
their
I mean,
software.
like, if I wanted to go find, so I guess, yeah, primary purpose, that wouldn't necessarily be an assessor's code there. I kind of I did a lot of like data diving with some of this, just because I got access to GIS, I got access to a lot of data sources, and I was trying to correlate between the assessor's website and some of the data that I'm pulling just to see, like, if I could match it up, and I had a hard time kind of finding the right codes through the assessor's department to get like that kind of output, right? Like I was looking for like all conservation restrictions in town, regardless of, right? Well, some of them are coded, so like some of them I could find via the assessors, but then obviously I was going my own way to find, what I know exists.
Yeah, supposedly they have a tool which you can't access.
Gotcha.
Okay, and I would think by now that may have changed. In the past it wasn't too sophisticated, because one of the bloops I notice here is in the one table of Essex County Greenbelt, okay, you have the Graff Reservation, which is 166 acres, and it doesn't show up on the 100-acre list, and it's the only one, but it's typical of the sort of things that got thrown up that way.
That's a good point.
But I think the idea here was and I don't know whether it actually translated, because I haven't looked recently, to actually have slightly different color coding, so that you would have large areas which would be easy to see compared with small 20-acre kinds of things, okay? So that obviously the Refuge, Old Town Hill, Martin Burns, places like that would instantly come up as being major areas, and therefore when you look at the map, you can get an idea of the geographic distribution of those. So are they, where are they in relation, for example, the question is, where are they in relation to the population centers in town? And so do they serve, and that way you can answer questions just by looking at a map. And I don't know whether it ever got done. Did it get done, Martha, do you know?
I don't think so.
No, okay, because last time I looked at an open space map, frankly, in order to be useful, it needed to be the size of that wall. I mean, it's the level of detail is just not. It doesn't function well on a computer screen at all.
Well, and especially on paper printout as well.
Yeah.
And I almost wondered if the open space map had to be broken out a little too. Like instead of being, you could have one all-encompassing map, obviously, to like lead off. But to David's point, do you have that 100-acre plus map on its own? Doesn't show smaller stuff. Doesn't include 61 properties. That the current map shows everything. It shows schools. It shows cemeteries. It shows everything on that map, and it's cluttered. Is it worthwhile to maybe do a little breakout from that, from like the master open space map, to like maybe highlight, maybe it's just what's just protected open space versus like open space that has, public access or something like that,
Yep.
Yeah, no, we were thinking the same thing.
Because it just
Having
gets
some
cluttered.
Usable maps.
Yeah.
I feel like the technology is so good now for visualization that we could come up with some really good maps using the same data sets, and breaking it in ways that would work. Big circles, little circles, to say.
Yeah,
Not every single parcel is highlighted, just like in this area, we've got this many, we've got the big parcels. I like the big parcel map too.
yeah,
Well, the whole walkability idea, plays into this too, because, one of the things I've learned, basically where you live in town means whether you can walk from your house to an open space where you can walk and see no houses, or whether you can do it comfortably on a bicycle, or whether you have to drive to do it. And so, to me, fascinating moving from Orchard Street, sort of where Jim is, to where I am right across the road here. I'm actually less close to a really nice collection of stuff, because I could walk from my house on Orchard Street to Great Meadow, to Martin Burns, and to other little sort of areas, whereas here, it's biking, and it's biking through, if I don't go through the middle of Byfield, which is not a super place to bike, I have to say.
Your state exit.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So, I think that's one of
So
the
we need to develop a trail right here to get you to the library, and then you could get up Forest Street to some really nice trails.
Yeah, right, which is...
Yeah, so I love what you guys are saying, just it's like I've been really concerned about people not being able to walk from their home.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
I've had people say that to me, oh, I don't walk around here, I get in my car and drive to an open space parcel, and I think, well, lucky for us, we have open space parcels to drive to, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to walk safely in?
Well, it's
from your
also
house?
the other wonderful thing is when you start out on a sidewalk, because the state had to do that when they did the highway, and the sidewalk just runs out,
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
right?
That's all really good.
Yeah. A dead end
Which
sidewalk.
is related to things like this, I think are really critical to talk about like how people are getting to this
Right.
Right.
newly central zone of our whole town's recreation. Well, if people have to be driving there, it's just, anyway, these layers of sort of impact. and
Well, one of the things in
considerations.
there is they don't, I think, really cite as much connecting it to the high school as they need to. That's a whole other
I've
discussion.
seen some real
But
scary.
remember also that walkability suddenly
Okay.
began to appear as a rating score on realty properties, right? So it gets to be an
That's
important,
yeah.
one of the selling things, yeah, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, we live in a state where you can actually talk about that. If you talk about some of the realtors I know in states where I mean, Las Vegas, right, what do you do?
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah, obviously, COVID pandemic really
Right,
shone some
It
lights on a lot of these issues
Yeah.
we're talking about in a different way that no one was thinking about previously.
I think Mike's got a very good point that we could provide maps that answered rather more specific questions than this huge kind of global thing which eventually doesn't have much use.
yeah, a lot of colors. Well, I think, people think open space, right? So they think, I can go there, right?
Yeah.
An agricultural preservation restriction doesn't allow public access. Most conservation restrictions don't. Some do, but they're, different kinds of open space. So kind of being able to present that in a way that, somebody, the end user could, take and
Sure. We had a classic one, the one up on South Street, which has 61 recreation. There's no way of accessing it. What's it? Trying to think the property owners, the Yesers piece of land that's up there, just before you get to the highway?
Where the solar field is now?
Hmm?
Where the solar field is now?
No,
Yeah,
That's not, it's not South.
the other
Street.
side of that, between the solar field and South Street. There's property there which is in 61B, and I don't know how you, or used to be anyway.
it's
and
permanently
there's-
protected now.
Hmm?
It's permanently protected now.
Right,
That
but
piece.
now, is it open to the public?
No,
So how's it going to 61B?
I don't know how it's still in 61B, but it has a conservation restriction on it.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the kind of weirdness that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's like the hands not talking to each other.
Exactly, yes,
Yeah.
right.
Are the trails in the inventory? Speaking of
Ooh.
public access.
I don't believe they were called out. I think it was just the primary purpose, which was an R for rec, with facilities-based activities, C for conservation with non-facilities-based activities, and B, conservation recreation. But I don't think it gave there was nowhere in here with like a trails inventory. I don't believe, no.
It's just the section,
sorry.
page 77. has
Yeah,
the
I'm sorry.
inventory references.
Yep.
You
Yep.
gotta go and
Yeah.
I got so hung up on the tables and data.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah, it talked about Bay Circuit Trail, state resources, Martin Burns, Crane Pond, Greenbelt mentioned there, Old Town Hill mentioned there. Obviously, there's a lot of updating that can go into all these sections here. Just a lot more available today.
The map was included as an appendix
Yeah.
in this.
indeed, yeah.
And the little map at the end referenced all those too, the thing
At
that,
the end.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the advancements in the rail trail from then to now. All that's been done. It needs to be included. Do you happen to know, like, when the town like, puts out their current 61 data? Like when they kind of have like, what's the year of that? Is it the fiscal year, like July is when they have
The applications are due in October.
they do it October,
Yeah.
okay. So we'd have 2023 currently, we wouldn't have or is it, so I'm sorry, October would have been for the following year?
Well, it would be, yeah, basically.
I think
think
it's
it would be-
calendar year.
Yeah, I think it's calendar
They
year.
enroll in October for the
Right, for the
January.
following
For
January.
24,
Yeah.
24, so we could get 2024 61
Yeah.
information
Yeah.
currently, okay. So I looked at 2022.
I think so.
Is what I had available, and I was actually kind of surprised at, I don't want to say how little, but kind of thought there was going to be more on the list, and it wasn't like an endless list of 61 properties. I don't know if that's because some have, had restrictions put on them and that they didn't need to go through that anymore, or whatever, but.
Some have come out for development, so.
Sure, right. Okay. I don't think I had any other major questions on the section, mostly because, again, a lot of it was just bringing data up to date. I think I did want to maybe not to read. I was thinking one night I was thinking maybe the presentation of the section could be reworded a little bit, but I want to relook at that.
Based on the data refresh, is it something that NVPC would be helpful to have? It sounds like these data pulls from the assessor's office, it would be great if they could do those, because it's not like you have access to those, or
Right,
it's
that's,
not like Greenbelt, so.
yeah, like the town stuff, the 61 stuff is what I definitely wouldn't have access to.
But that would be through our assessors.
So that would be through the assessors. But for the ag preservation restrictions in town, through Mass Department of Ag, you can actually run a report. You can highlight the area you want, and then they generate a little report that tells you all the APRs in that area, which was kind of nice. So I just did that, got that information that way. I didn't run an inventory yet of like, I think I said like state land, fed lands, things like that in town. I looked at a lot of our records and easily pulled, you know, a couple spreadsheets together on what we own in town and acreage numbers and things like that, parcels and everything. Is there any value to having like recording information for like conservation restrictions or ag preservation restrictions in this inventory, or is that kind of too much and it's better to be a little more? I mean, so it's public knowledge, there's public record stuff, like anybody can go find it, but do we want to present that kind of information to people?
Is there anything specified in the workbook? I would like
Not necessarily.
look at that first, and then I would say like if, I mean, depending on how this all goes, but if you're pulling something from DAR and it's a list, and then we go look at our assessors and they're not all in the assessors, then I think
Right,
that's where
having all that.
like books and page and like other, you know,
Yeah.
information. So I'd say like make the universe as big as possible when we're pulling stuff, and then we
Yeah,
can like sort
whittle it
out
down.
what actually gets put into the plan, or if it's like available in a spreadsheet for some other
Okay.
use. That's fine.
Or at least maybe for like municipal stuff, like the stuff that the town holds. Maybe we do kind of want that level of like detail in there. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but if we were to prioritize open space, like which properties, privately owned properties, we would want to target, we'd want to know which ones had conservation restrictions on them or not.
Right.
You know, for some are just wide open to be developed, maybe there's, and those, but a sensitive area, maybe that's something that we would want to go for, so.
Right, and that really goes to table 5.8 here, the privately owned and unprotected parcels of open space interest, you know, looking exactly at that, what the adjacencies are. And
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to the maps again that Essex Greenbelt did, prioritizing these open space parcels based on their agricultural value or flood protection value or other things like that. You know, that would be a good source to go back to.
Definitely, and, you know, Abby Hardy Moss, who's the head of our GIS program, you know, is still, she has the data that I think she presented to you and Kristen at one point in time for some other, you know, use in town here, and is, you know, willing to either come in and present to all of us as a committee, or, you know, have us use that resource of getting the prioritization data from her for the plan,
Yeah,
you know.
which I think would be great. And I think she wanted to present to the committee, which wasn't really active at the time.
Yeah.
Also the Conservation Commission, so if she was willing to do that, I think that might be great.
Yeah, she definitely is. I kind of reaffirmed that with her today before I came tonight,
Good.
just in case. I was like, hey, Abby, remember when you told me you did this? Like, are you still interested in doing this? And she definitely is, so.
Yeah, and it was a great set of maps, I think would be really useful.
Yeah, and I mean, we would have the ability, you know, obviously to decide what we would want her to use for data points there to run that prioritization. You know, I think she's done it on, for the town here, it's parcels greater than 5 acres. She gave me the whole criteria, and I kind of forget now what they all were. Greater than 5 acres. I think she was focused maybe on ag stuff.
It was the ag, it was flooding.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of other ones too, and I can't remember what they were.
Yeah. She could obviously let us know what we could, you know, choose for different inputs there to kind of generate that.
But I think that'll be an important piece when we get to the action plan of really
Yeah, definitely.
looking at parcels of high interest.
She's done it for other towns too, so it's not like a unique ask just for us, you know, she's run this for a few different municipalities.
So I know David, you did some work on the survey, and I also know that it's getting late, and I'm kind of curious, Barry, if you have anything that you want to add or that has occurred to you while you're listening to us talk about the open space plan and open space and VEC plan and updates?
The only thing that crossed my mind specifically is how on earth are you going to get this done before the next one needs to be started?
That's always the challenge.
Fair question.
There's a ton of work in here, and
Yeah.
until somebody sent me the notice that there was going to be a meeting tonight, and maybe you'd be interested, I said, okay, I need something to do tonight. I don't watch television, so I thought I'd just come over.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, I'm very impressed by the volume of work you all have done so far, and I think that's just the scratch of the project you're heading for.
Right.
So,
Well, they did change it from 5 years to 7 years, but they're asking towns to do it, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head because
I mean, this is one of those things that
it's hard to keep it up to date.
it's, you know, you get your page finished and you get the 3 down, and all of a sudden something back here has changed.
Right. Yeah.
And nobody's ever heard of how this work is done or what it is, and ultimately, maybe not every individual in town looks at it, but it's darn important to have it in one place.
Yeah.
So, on behalf of all those who pay no attention, including me until now, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, those are
Thanks for
good
coming.
comments. Yeah. I do think that's why a little bit of the just generating lists, like you said, as soon as you make the list, it's gonna get outdated. So just thinking as we go forward, thinking about the ways to keep it, I don't know, keep it dynamic.
Yeah.
Because it is dynamic,
Yeah.
we're gonna, you have to create the plan, and then you don't have to create the plan for another 7 years in order for that particular purpose. But if our goals are related to walkability and getting people out on properties and getting more awareness, or whatever, those are the things I think would be the most important.
I did, tell me to shut up whenever I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. But it seems to me that, while this report is important, the stuff you just talked about is more important. You're doing this, and it's great, but who knows about it, and who knows that they can get the resource to figure out what they need to discover in the town.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. Which kind of, to me, translates to hiring a consultant to help do this thing. But then we have this sort of vibrant committee that can continue to work on fun stuff.
None of my business, but
And
if
carry it
you get
forward.
a consultant who can put in the time and focus and get it done, so you can do that and get out and talk to the community about what you're doing and what you found and what
Right.
they need to know about, so they can stand in line behind you when you go to protect something.
Yeah. That's a great way
You need
to
a
say it.
PR chair.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I think, we had the last plan done, but there was a whole action plan, but, really need the energy and everything to actually start working on those things.
And I think people who, frankly, who just do report after report after, and then it's time to start the next one, don't even get to think about the PR aspects and, okay, we're going to spend X dollars on it, we're going to spend X dollars worth of time that we didn't have to pay for with all the folks in here, and still end up with just a bunch of paper.
Right.
That would be a shame for all the work you're putting in.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
Mm.
Essentially 15 years ago, we ended up with a bunch of paper. It was okay, but it was a bunch of paper, and there was no real commitment to it, I think, as far as, I would see.
Just sitting here trying to listen and read what I could at the same time. There's a bunch of fascinating stuff in there. There really is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
It is.
interesting stuff.
It's a neat town.
But I think to me, the kind of thing that the dead giveaway in here. I don't know whether you got this far, Mike, but on page 81, open space equity. I would love all of us to just read those 4 lines and see how you respond.
My numbers are a little different.
It's the end of last page of section 5.
Yeah, page 81 is the last, it's a single paragraph all by itself on the last page on my layout here.
Yeah, see, I got the outdated one by just a touch.
Yeah, you guys know the ins and outs and where everything is so much better and how close it is to, you know, the rest of the town. We're sort of isolated over in Old Town, so we know it's over there. But I'm not as familiar with how equitable it is. So you guys have a better perspective on that. No, I feel like you guys know the town so well. You know every street, you name off the street, you know exactly where it is. I don't know where you're talking about. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, this is wish fulfillment, is what this paragraph is
Yeah.
about to me. Did you agree?
Aspirational.
Yeah, well, okay, I have problems with that word.
I know, I understand.
No, please, because that's too often what happens, and that is, it's sort of, this is what we would like to think. And the reality is not so much that it's awful what worse, but essentially, if that's the way you see the community in which you live, then take off your rose-tinted glasses and really look, you know, because some of those things, the one that makes me smile is the beach one. If you can get there is the first thing, and if there's a beach when you get there is another question. I mean, all of those things.
Well, it'll be interesting with the, you know, we're talking about the maps and the graphics, and I think that we'll come up with some creative ways that won't be an extra big lift to sort of actually answer that question by
Right.
slicing and dicing it in a way that answers a little bit of that, things that were raised. Be interesting.
One thing I would say, just related to that, is that, yeah, with all this, and similar to your comments about how much fascinating stuff is in here, it's almost like, I work in software development, and we often, you can get so bogged down in the details and the specs and all that, but we call either like use cases or user stories are really important. You know, what's the experience of the person who's actually going to interact with the system? And there's a certain degree of, I think, that you're referencing here, like what are some examples of what people may want to go do, right? And you know, that becomes their entry point into this. But that's again what the committee's about, probably more so than the document, which,
Yeah.
you know, just
I
repeating
think-
what was said there. Yeah.
I think I like what Barry said of like
Yeah.
expanding support for more open space protection when the town has opportunities, and what's the trajectory to get there. It's like outreach and
Right.
appreciation, but there's some other steps before you actually.
And as an observer of being, and I still refer to myself as a newbie, and I've been here, we're getting close to 20 years, but I'm still a new person in town. And there are more and more of me coming in than there are some of the folks who have been around for centuries in their families. And that's a market that needs to be addressed. If I have no business saying any of that, but I think it's a viable market. Because they also tend to be probably doing financially better than some folks, because they're coming in to buy properties that are new and very expensive, and have resources to maybe kick back in if they're attracted to some of it. So there's a marketing process here.
Yeah. There.
All right. Well, it's getting late.
Yes.
I know we haven't done everything. We haven't really talked about the survey. Do you want to save that, talking about the survey for next time? Because
Sure, well, I mean, it's feedback that I'm interested in, obviously, and you can actually do that via email, maybe. If there are very simple questions that I can answer right now, I mean, I'll tell you what I did, you know, as you all have gathered, my attitude to this is a bit different from the rest of you, okay? And so what I did was I said, okay, I don't need to reinvent the wheel for goddamn. I mean, I really don't. So very simple. I looked at neighbors who had done a recent open space plan. And guess what? Boxford and Rowley have done recent open space plan. And interestingly, if you look at the people within a radius, they are two communities that are in many ways quite like ours, okay? Obviously Boxford is a little more well-heeled than perhaps Newbury seen as a whole. It also doesn't have Plum Island, thank God. But it has interests which have to do with things like horse riding and that sort of stuff, which really minorly is here. Rowley's very similar, but doesn't have the beach issue and a number of other things. So I simply looked and I said, okay, so they had to follow, or they didn't necessarily, the same sort of open space plan layout that we have in front of us from the state. So what did they do? So I looked at basically the questionnaires that they put out and essentially tailored them together for our use, and then thought about the fact that, okay, questionnaires always have the problem that they are usually an unwanted intrusion into people's lives. Why should I do this? All right? How do you also decide the questions I haven't addressed here, because it's not my kind of expertise at all, is how do you decide who gets it? Because you can't send it to the whole population unless, because that boots a large hole through the middle of the budget, right? And you don't have the data crunching ability to look at something like that. So those kinds of questions I put aside that would have to happen later. But basically I think you need to try and involve people and indicate that these kinds of questions are the questions which in fact will make a demonstrable connection to their lives. And therefore, that was my idea at the end, that you would ask people if they would want to volunteer to work in the whole area of open space as a volunteer, to identify, because one of the things I found out, I looked at a number of other communities outside of the two that I stole from, and it's very interesting how impersonal they were. How, for example, questionnaires didn't even identify who was sending it, in the sense of the person in the town. There was nothing at the top that said, this is from, or if you have questions, please connect with, and I just felt that it was important to do that. And so that's why this is a bit more talky as well as questions. That was what I did, because I don't think I really don't think it's that difficult to get essentially a questionnaire which will either tell us that we are now currently asking the wrong questions, and I tend to think we are at times. I think we're concerned about stuff that we really don't have to be concerned about initially. Or are we in fact fairly well informed in terms of the direction that we seem to be going? And so the question about this becomes, when do you do it? Because do you do it to essentially majorly inform yourselves as to what you should be doing, or do you do it to check as to what you've decided you should be doing? You saw the difference there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Validation.
And I don't know the answer to that question. Well, I'm not qualified to answer it anyway as an individual, but I don't know whether I know the answer to that question off the top of my head. My guess is, my instincts are, I want to know more about what Joe Schmo and his kids and his occasional mother who visits from New Jersey wants to know about where to do stuff in Newbury. Something like that. But that tends to be my bias. But I'm very much interested in what you have said earlier about the fact that essentially you do all this stuff, but if you don't sell it, if you don't run the flag up the pole and send the band down the street and contact people and have people involved, then why bother? Because nothing's going to change.
Yeah, those are great, David. Thank you for doing that research and that summary. I think my memory of knowing some other towns going through the update process is the state is very concerned about public input and the survey process. I don't recall exactly, but I feel like that's an area where sometimes they go back and say, you haven't done it good enough. So I think we need to do some, we will need to look into that more carefully in terms of the questions you've just identified. So, so I think
Right.
those are the right questions, and I think they'll probably answer them for us to a certain extent. Hopefully there's some flexibility to also make sure we're doing what we want to do, not just what they're telling us we have to do.
Yeah, no, I feel like we should start with those questions at the next meeting.
Yeah.
We can send you feedback too. I mean, we reviewed it, we have some feedback, I think it's great, but I feel like let's do it,
Yeah.
let's give it the justice that it deserves during the next meeting. And maybe we can send some email stuff in between.
Right, okay.
Yeah?
Because there may be a major boo-boo or two in terms of what is actually said.
No, I think
That's
great.
possible too. Because in between doing this and then printing this, we've had the painters in, so I couldn't find anything. Yeah.
No, that's great work.
I want to just, have you guys had a chance to look at the minutes? Because we should approve them if people, all new committee members.
Yeah, I have it. Let's see here. No, it's in here.
And then if we want to try to set a next meeting date while we're together, we can do that by email. Those are the two things I still.
All right, I have one question. Is there an event this summer, like a Newberry Days, Newberry event? I feel like last year was a
Newbury Town Day.
Newberry Town Day. Is that going to happen this year? And the only reason I'm asking is, is it an opportunity for us to be there to connect with some of the Newbury residents and, I don't know, talk about the open space. Start with the outreach, start with the marketing.
I think it was in June, right? But I think they're moving it to August.
Yeah, I think it's August.
Yeah,
but-
later in August, I
Yeah,
believe.
but I think the committee was appointed to do it.
Right.
All right, well, I'm willing to see if that's online and the person who's running it. I don't know, does anybody have any interest in exploring that? Because I can explore at least a little bit before we meet next time, but I think it would be like a pretty quick turnaround, but I also feel like, depending on the day, it's usually like a table and
Yeah, well,
planning it.
Yeah, let's
it-
find out.
if we do something like that, and I think you're right on the money here, is because then it would be nice to have something like this ready to go
Yeah.
so that we can in fact hand it out to people who, you know, just having that opportunity makes a real connection.
Yeah.
And also I think the other thing I think that we could do, and that's a short-term thing, we could do it fairly fast, and originally, if I'm thinking correctly, the map at the end of the 2010 Open Space Plan is the map I put together, okay? I think it's based on the idea it's a trifold and that it can be on two sides of a single sheet, something like that. And it used to be in the town clerk's office and in the library. But I don't know whether I've got the file and the fact the file's in here to pull it out. Why we can't get that out as an interim or something. It's I think the only thing that might need really updating is the Greenbelt property, the one on Middle Road, what's it called?
Morris.
Yes, that's I think the only actual thing that's missing off that map. If I'm not, let me take a look at it and see, because we can probably add that in fairly easily. But why not get something out there before, you know, before we get into all these other things? Because it's doable. Because if you come here, I don't know, what else is there? What else is there? What would any of us pick up? Okay, there's all the trails, right? You know, the app that you put on your phone.
Yeah. No,
But-
I think that's a great idea. I mean, we have people who come in like, I actually got my beach permit. That would be a perfect opportunity to
Yeah,
like have
Right.
more information available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you know, why it can't be online, downloadable online? That shouldn't be any problem.
Yep.
And,
That's easy.
you know, I didn't copyright it, so.
So let's talk about these great, like this was, I like this category of like sort of outreach. So get some information about town days, get some information about like what already exists that we can kind of revamp a little and get it out sooner. I like
Look at how much you've spurred Barry with your PR inspirational
I
talk.
know, that's amazing. Okay, does anyone want to vote to approve the minutes?
Yeah, how do you start that off?
Make a motion to.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the February 6th
Yes.
Open Space
Yes,
and Recreation
Second.
Committee meeting.
okay, thank you.
Second.
David already seconded.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's all
All in favor?
right. Aye.
Any opposed?
Alright,
Unanimous.
thank you. Meeting dates, Tuesdays, still good? We're now, today is the third Tuesday?
Yes.
So we could go about a month out, which would be mid-May. Go through town meeting. I don't know, May 14th?
That's election day. I don't know if that's an issue. Not supposed to hold public hearings on election day, but meetings.
14th is election day, is it?
Town election, yes.
Okay.
That was the 7th.
It's 14th.
Okay.
Anne was asking me earlier.
Who said that?
What about the 7th?
7th?
I know that's only 3 weeks, so over the 21st. We have one.
Are you on the town calendar or are you on something
No,
else?
I'm on my calendar. I can go with the town calendar.
May 7th or May 21st? Anyone
can
have a
do either.
preference?
Yep, both good for me.
Both are good for me too. Do we need to check room availability?
Okay, why don't I we'll check the town calendar with select board, FinCom, room availability. This is a nice
Okay.
space.
This was
Yeah,
great.
this worked
Yeah.
great.
Nice, absolutely.
It's nicer than
Well,
where else.
is that happening? In other words, I talked to, what's her name, Christine? No.
Cindy.
Sydney,
Cindy. And she said she was going to talk to Tracy about setting up a way to use this for meetings when there's a need.
okay,
Okay, and it has to do with access, I think, and locking her office and a bunch of things.
right,
But the reason I did that simply was, I mean, on a couple of occasions when there were problems with meetings, there were no lights on here that I could see from my house, and that meant that one could have had a meeting. And this is a town facility as far as I'm concerned. Also, Barry and I certainly are qualified to be here, right?
I think it makes sense. It wasn't hard, both Cindy and Jonathan, our IT person, were very happy to
Right.
accommodate and help, so I think that going forward, we can certainly have this
Right.
as an option, but we'll confirm with everybody.
So we're looking at the 7th? Is that what we said?
Or the 21st.
Or the
7th or the 21st.
Well, I would plump for the earlier the better, because I find it difficult. Maybe
Just
it's my
keep it
age,
going.
but I find it difficult to hold in my mind and you know, you go through stuff like a meeting like this and within 6 weeks, it's gone, forget it.
Yeah.
Whereas within, you know, whatever it's gonna be,
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, maybe that's too quickly, but I would prefer it.
Yeah, I don't mind it either. I
okay,
feel
we'll
like
just
this
check
would
the
be-
rooms, and if the
Yeah.
phone works, just keep it going.
Okay.
Okay. You want to make
Yeah.
a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
What was that, Bill?
Yeah, you beat me to it.
All in favor?
Aye.